What's happening, all of y'all out there in podcast land? I'm Joey Powell for Inside Carolina Coast to Coast Podcast coming at you right now. We're brought to you by Johnny T-Shirts. Appreciate everybody making time for us, whether you're watching us on the old YouTubes there, or if you're listening to us on however you consume podcast media. We appreciate it. We're glad that we're in your rotation and just want to express that. I've been at Boschmer Stadium a lot over the last little while and went to the ACC tournament, watching a lot of Diamond Heels baseball. I just want to say how much I appreciate being able to interact with a lot of you guys and girls out there. Shout out to everybody who stops me and says, "Hey, do you know Sherrell and Sean?" And I'm like, "Yes, I do." But just it's fun to interact with all of our listeners and viewers when I get a chance to, and just appreciate you guys making this opportunity what it is. It's enjoyable to be able to interact with you guys, hear your thoughts, your feedback, and some of the feedback I got we'll talk about here in just a second. Sherrell McMillan and Sean Moran are with me. Boys, as we record this, it's June 1, which seems like it has been the longest 6-7 weeks, but also where the hell did the season go that quickly? I'll just ask you guys just to start the show off, and I told the fellas before we started recording today, this is probably going to be the most freelance show, to steal a UNC offense term, that we've done in a long time, just because there's a lot of hodgepodge and potpourri out there that we're going to try to touch on. But fellas, the best thing that's happened to you in the past month as we sit here on June 1, Sherrell, I'll come to you first.
The best thing that's happened to me, or are we talking about
the best thing that's happened to Sherrell D. McMillan?
I would say Luka Bogavac committing, because that likely means, and it doesn't mean for sure, but it likely means that they are done with rotation players. So it can kind of really start to look at high school basketball, because we're a little behind there because the portal season took a long time. So
that's the best thing that happened to you?
That's the best thing that happened to me, because now don't have to worry about portal and all that other stuff. Can go back to the basics of like high school recruiting and talking to parents and that kind of thing.
Okay, I can buy that. I appreciate it. I thought you were gonna talk about a really good couple of ham hocks you might have had somewhere on your travels on the weekends, but I'll accept a commitment from a Montenegrin as well. Sean, same thing, man. What's the best thing that's happened to you in the last month?
That's a good question. I'd probably say taking my son to the zoo for the first time.
Hell yeah. What was his favorite animal exhibit, or was it just being around and out and all that stuff?
I think the gorillas and their activities along with the monkeys. So he hasn't stopped talking about it.
Does he have 99 friends that he's going to go fight this gorilla? No, not so much.
Nope.
All right. Well.
But yeah, it's been a good month. Obviously a little lighter, but segueing into what Sherrell said, also some high school basketball as well. So able to switch from the transfer into high school, and I know that'll continue throughout the summer.
Well, love that. And I'll answer my own question. I've just really enjoyed being able to go to games at the Bosch and at the DBAP lately with my kids. Kids sports season is finally wrapped up, so I'm actually having a chance to go back and do some less pressure-filled things as a dad, and it's been fun to see. I want to give a couple of quick shout-outs to Tom that sat behind my son and I at the Bosch on Friday afternoon as the Tar Heels played Holy Cross. It was fun talking to him for a little while. But also want to give a shout out to our guy, Gary Mabry. Gary is at Nugget Palooza on Twitter. Sent us a really, really kind note the other day just about how he enjoys listening to the show. And not that it's just such a positive note. I don't want to shout him out just because he sent something really nice to us. But Gary's dad pitched for the Tar Heels many, many moons ago and was a really, really good part of the program. To tell you how good Gary's dad was, he had and I'm a Tar Heel video made, which if you've come to any games on site on campus at UNC, you know that those Rams Club, I'm such and such and I'm a Tar Heel means that you've actually made it. And Gary's dad actually has one of those. So I just want to say, appreciate Gary sending the kind note. Unfortunately, his dad passed back in January, but I just shared about how he's been able to bond over this show and with his dad. And if we're able to give you some of that sort of comfort and positivity in your life, man, hey, we're privileged to do it. And again, just appreciate Gary listening and all of you guys that listen, but Gary for sharing just such a kind memory. I think most of us who are still blessed enough to still have our dads with us understand how heavy that is. So just thankful for that. Fellas, let's move into some ball talk, shall we? First things first, Luka Bogavac. Luka commits to North Carolina. You saw our emergency podcast that dropped within the last 24 hours as we're recording this. But we tried to kind of hit that as best we could when it happened, give you some synopsis. But Sherrell, I want to ask you, what is, just looking back on that commitment, what is your takeaway and how do you feel about North Carolina acquiring his commitment and what that means with regard to the offense and, for better words, the roster looking a little more complete for next season?
Well, I think we've learned a little bit more since the commitment, and the most impressive thing to me is that they actually were on him a lot longer than I think anyone realized. Just talking to a few folks around the program, and I think when we found out, they were kind of like, "What took you guys so long to find out?" Because they had been on him for some time. So it wasn't it. He was a pivot, but he wasn't a pivot that happened in the last week or two or three or probably even four. So there was a lot of legwork done with this player. So it's obviously someone they really, really like. So to me, that was the biggest takeaway. And I think probably all the way back to the Andre Stojakovic recruitment. I think they've been involved with him since then. And as you know, that's quite some time ago. So again, to me, it just shows a willingness and an ability to not only identify players who are overseas, to target players who are overseas, but also to close on them. And probably for UNC, the biggest um, deficit, detriment, whatever word you want to use, has been their ability to close with some of these guys. Like they'll get them on campus or they'll get their attention or they'll talk to their agents and have good conversations, but they're not able to close. But with this player, with Vasar and a few others, it really showed an ability to close. And that's, I think, an improvement, dramatic improvement over what happened last year.
Go to Sean and talk a little bit more about Bogavac's game and the Adriatic League and just all of that, together. Sherrell, how much do you think Jim Tanner plays into a part of this? We knew that Tanner's overseas agency and his, I guess, his existence in that market and in that sphere would have some influence in how he helped North Carolina. What do you think he's adding to the closing that you're talking about? And again, the two that you mentioned just happen to be international players, but how do you think Jim Tanner's role and his existence and his part within this entire process has amplified North Carolina's ability to get these guys across the finish line?
I think it's working in concert. You always need a point man on something, and I think for recruitments, there's still like an assistant typically who does a lot of the not in person, but does a lot of the phone conversations and some of the legwork. But I think you have to have someone who has the master plan, as it were, kind of in their office on the wall, and it says, "This is how we're going to operate. This is how we're going to do things." And when you have that kind of vision coming from on top or shared with Hubert Davis, it's a lot easier for it to funnel down. So I think alignment has been better this year. I think the plan coming in was better this year. And I think the plan to pivot when the first plan didn't work, plan B, as it were, or plan C or plan D, was much better this year. And that is, I think, where Tanner really kind of shines in that organizational alignment and bringing people together to have conversations. We reported a while back that Buzz Peterson and TJ Bosner were kind of working as his, I don't know, I guess as his staff in this initial portal season. And I think they helped. And so when you have a plan, it's a lot easier to kind of work the plan than it is to kind of be all over the place. So I think that is a huge benefit. And then, like you said, his international connections, I'm sure, helped them get in the door. But I do think the coaching staff deserves credit as well because they're still involved and the players are going to play for them. They're not going to play for Jim Tanner. So there has to be a level of comfort with the actual coaches. So I think everybody to some degree has stepped their game up from not just last year, but just the last couple of years in what UNC needed to do. And maybe having someone, like I said, as kind of the person bringing all that together is really the true value of Tanner at this point. Now, we still expect him to build out a staff and, do bigger and better things moving forward. But for this season, it had to work this way. And I think, they did a pretty good job, all things considered.
Yeah, especially when you think about the fact that Tanner was just officially added I want to say late in the season. So it's not like he's been working with Hubert Davis in any official capacity for an incredibly long time. Sean, I want to ask you, now that you've had a chance to go back and look at Bogavac's game, I think we've started to see, since the commitment was announced, more video popping up because there's more of a demand for it. You started to see more, you know, I know I'm showing my age, but tape on this guy, both in highlight form, but even complete games. So I'll kind of leave it at your feet. Tell me what you've seen in watching more footage of him that maybe you didn't see in the first pass that you shared on the commitment pod, or are there some other things that you feel like maybe you feel strongly about now than you did on a cursory glance?
I'd say the main thing would probably be his ability to use his left hand when attacking. I think the shooting has been discussed. The numbers this past season, 40% plus, obviously extremely strong. But I think using his left hand, especially in the latter parts of the season, his team using him, almost getting him on the move a little bit to give him a head of steam, and then when he does have that left hand, if it's a mismatch, being able to get a step on the defender, or just being able to put more pressure. I think in his games he has been able to finish at the rim when he gets there. I do think that will still be an adjustment for him when he does get to the college level with some of the different length and athleticism that he'll see around the rim. But I think his ability to put pressure on the defense off the dribble versus being more than just a standstill shooter has been one thing I was able to notice in some of his later games. I think one of the games I was just watching through yesterday, because a lot of their team, and this is a team in the Adriatic League, Mega, they have a lot of players that are going to play at high major Division I colleges. Their best player is probably looking to go in the draft, probably second round as well. So a lot of younger talent that we'll be seeing in the U.S. And he had 27 points that game. There are a few times he got switched onto the big guy that's going to Kentucky, and he would just try to get him in isolation, basically back up and take his time, and then go attack him. One worked successfully. Another time they brought a double team against him. But in general, I do think offensively, even from watching him 2 years ago when he played USC, I think he's gotten a little bigger. And with that, just an adjustment to playing against taller, more athletic players. So shooting, I think, is the one thing we knew about, but I also think his ability to attack, especially off the left hand, has been something that should hopefully play a positive role at UNC next year.
So, Sean, I want to throw something at you, and then I'm going to let Sherrell host for a little bit, just because we were truly freelancing. So let's actually lean into that a little bit. Sean, in some of the video I've seen, he looks like that he can be more of a facilitator. Now, I don't want folks to hear that and read into me thinking that he's going to start at the point and UNC is going to initiate a lot of offense through Bogavac. But I did see that he's able to facilitate and get shots for his teammates, maybe a little better than I did when we first started looking into him. I would ask you, do you agree, or maybe am I being a little too hopeful when I'm watching?
From his just straight traditional stats, 2 assists per game, so nothing that is going to cause you to raise your eyebrows. I do think his ball handling ability, where I'd slot him natural position shooting guard. I think during the season, he's played a little bit at the 1, some at the 3, but I think with his size, and I think when we talked about him versus Karchenkov, his ability and agility, I would say, it was probably one of the bigger differences, where Karchenkov was more of a like just straight line attacker. He can do more with the dribble, more in pick and roll. I think offer some help as a secondary ball handler, be able to kick out. I think could be fun watching him with Vasar, almost a two-man game, or even some guys that can pick and pop. So I do think it is an ability that he has. Definitely wouldn't say he's Elliot Cadeau in terms of expecting that assist range, but I think from a guy that's going to be playing on the wing, I think it's nice to have that ability and skill set, especially in transition if it's pitched ahead to him.
So coming into this, we talked about some, offensively, the bigger questions being facilitating, which you just mentioned, some shooting, which we have. I think we're all clear that Bogavac is a pretty good shooter, and that's an expectation that he'll be able to come in and do that. The other question we had was Carolina's down 3 with a minute left, and they have to go get a basket. Like, who's going to do it? Who's going to be the guy? And I don't know if there needs to be an answer to that because they're going to have a lot of talent. But the question is, can Bogovac be that for UNC next season?
Good question. I don't think he, this year, for instance, I think he said, hey, if you need a, you have 5 seconds left, who's going to be that guy you give the ball to? And I think RJ Davis is the first person you think of, but it was really Cadeau that was taking a lot of those shots. Some were by other teams' strategy of not letting RJ touch it. Other times, Syracuse, it was Cadeau creating and hitting big baskets. So I do think he could have that ability, but at the same time, I think for this team in general, their key to success is going to be how well they're playing together, and almost going back 2 years ago to that team moving the ball quickly, very smart. So I think a lot of it is going to be more how they're thinking through the game, and if they are able to run plays to get people on the move so that you have different options versus, hey, give it to Bogavac and let him try to ISO, because that's not gonna work out most likely. Same thing with Trimble or Evans in terms of their, I'd say, speed and ability to take people fully off the dribble. So I do think it's them getting in pick and rolls, getting them in movement, some of the bigs picking and popping, cutting, etc. So putting that almost on the coaching staff to get those players in motion and on the team to be able to connect very quickly and have that as a strength offensively as well as defensively in terms of that connectivity.
So, other than it being Hubert Davis' best team at UNC, I think 2 years ago is kind of their model of what they hope this upcoming season looks like. And there's a lot of similarities, honestly, between the two, as what happened the year before with the NIT, what happened this year with the first four kind of struggles, kind of, guys who were around and just never either got the opportunity or never were able to fully develop at UNC. And they basically, between transfers and people going pro, the roster is purged just like it was this year. And they bring in a group where I think the hope is, in my opinion, still to this day, I still say the NIT team was more overall talented 1-to-1 than the team that the next season got a number one seed. And I think that's kind of what you're looking at this year. I don't know if this year's team upcoming is more talented 1-to-1, but I think it's closer than people think. And so you have a team where you hope the individual parts are not greater than the sum with this year's team. And it seems like to me that's the hope. That's where UNC wants to go because they're bringing in a newcomer class, which including transfers and portal of 9 guys as it stands right now. And I think that season, heading into the number one seed season, it was 8 guys, 7 or 8 guys who were new. So a very similar reset. I think from folks we talked to, we kind of heard some similar language that just it wasn't good enough. The mix wasn't right. They had to get the chemistry. All those kind of things are what we heard after that season, and to some degree after this season. So that's, I think, the coaching staff's hope, despite maybe not having a player at a certain position that they really wanted, or maybe not having quite enough at a certain role. They feel like that the individual pieces will come together and make this a pretty good team. And honestly, man, the folks we talked to around Carolina are pretty excited about their class. And I think they have reason to be. It's not perfect. I don't think anybody would say it's perfect, but I think 2 months ago everyone would have taken this class. It just kind of the way it happened and some of the breaks, I think, color how people feel about it.
Yeah, I think something that a lot of people probably would take to your point, Sherelle, is that this team won't go into next season with the glaring holes, or at least obvious holes that that it had last year. And I think that's something that's been a knock against the staff is, they went into last season after missing on some guys with just glaring weaknesses. And I think as we sit here on June 1, you can at least say that, like you said, Sherelle, they've kind of filled in those. And if there's an obvious weakness, it's not really obvious to the rest of the world. Sean, go ahead.
Few different thoughts. I think when you look at, especially from a backcourt perspective, there was a downgrade in athleticism. I don't think there's any questioning what Cadeau and Ian, even Drake brought to the table. So I think you are relying on that, the smarts of the team and that connectivity to be functioning better together. I think the scary thing, and Sherrell used the word a few times, is hope, because there is a lot of hope that people are going to kind of improve or build into what we think they can be. And as Sherrell's mentioned, 16 parlay, maybe it's even higher than that in terms of everything working together. I think fully agree with him on the team that they put together. I think can function very well as a team, and getting rid of any of the chemistry issues. I think the one, to me, big difference from 2 years ago is you had, coming into the season, almost pre-established roles across the board, from two returning guys that were dominant and you knew what they were going to bring to the table, and then two other experienced players coming in to fit around with them. Where this team, there's 8 or 9 different guys. I think the lineups, you'll probably see a lot of trying it out, which can be a little scary because that could be a game by game thing, or even a half by half, where whoever's playing well in the first half, now let's run with them in the second half, and it takes a while to figure out what that proper 5-man lineup is, because I think you could probably go a lot of different directions with some of the flexibility that they have. So it is a positive. I think getting Bogavac, especially with Powell leaving, that extra player provides that flexibility. But at the same time, there's a lot more question marks of how are people going to fit in together than there were two years ago.
Well, I think there's probably some positivity in the fact that hopefully all these guys will be in at a decent time, or maybe we'll be here relatively early so they can begin that bonding process. I know Sherrell has written some for the IC Premium message boards recently to tell you that some of these transfers are already getting to campus and will be there fairly quickly. I think that the biggest thing that is causing these guys to get into campus early is the fact that Johnny T-shirt is open. I know we've been in between semesters and the spring semester ended and we're rolling into summer, but Johnny T-shirt's still there. And I don't think that can be discounted. I don't think that can be overlooked. I think if you're a transfer coming to North Carolina, you want all the things that come with that. And that includes the ability to go to Johnny T-shirt and swag yourself out, as I heard my son say the other day. Get everything you need. If Johnny T-shirt doesn't have it, you don't need it. I've mentioned baseball a couple of times. Man, I will tell you right now, Johnny T-shirt is probably minted just on the amount of baseball gear that they've sold in the last few weeks, because the Bosch was full of it. So if you'd like to be one of those folks, hopefully North Carolina will get to host a Super Regional here very soon. You can get your own gear from Johnny T-shirt. Premium subscribers know you get an extra 10% off of Johnny T-shirts, already amazing discounts and prices. Go see them, visit them online. Either way, you're going to be happy you did. We'll stop really quickly. If you're watching us online, nothing changes on YouTube. But if you're listening to us, we're going to stop really quickly. There will be some national ads dropped in here. We'll be right back talking a little bit more summer ball, UNC's roster becoming more and more clear. You're listening to the Coast to Coast podcast here on InsideCarolina.com. Joey Powell here for IC, Sherrell McMillan, Sean Moran there. Thanks, guys, for making time with us. So, in anticipation of this here show today, I figured I would take some questions from our listeners. Again, I mentioned at the top how much I enjoy seeing folks out in the wild. But we took a couple of questions here, and I think we've actually really got some good ones. I only posted them out on the X, formerly known as Twitter platform. And so we've got some good ones. I'll throw these back to you guys, and we'll try to give credit to the folks who asked them and what their Twitter handles are. That's hard to say really fast. First guy, at NC Bags, you know him as Andy Bagwell, co-author of the Duke Sucks book. Andy asked, now that the roster looks to be mostly complete, do you see any offensive or defensive strategy tweaks based on the personnel? Sean, I think you were kind of tap dancing into this a second ago. I want to ask you if you can expand on that a little bit, specifically what you think offensive and defensive strategy tweaks may be.
Yeah, I'll go back. This was maybe 2 or 3 podcasts ago where we were talking about how does that team, what would you try to do differently? And I think offensively, the biggest issue across the board a lot of the time was the standing still for a lot of the players, and there's only really two men, a two-man game. So I think with this team, we talked about the downgrade in athleticism from that backcourt perspective and wing perspective. So it is getting people on the move, whether that's Caleb Wilson on the perimeter, Bogavac. I think Evans, you want to utilize his shooting. So to me, I'm hoping that the UNC staff is taking the summer and looking at some of what UConn does, looking at some, now that they have potentially starting two international players, some of the off-ball movement and sets that and actions that those guys run. But at the same time, I know Sherrell's pointed out a lot. There were a lot of actions that they did run, and maybe it wasn't executed to the exact need that the team was looking for, and it resulted, or sometimes it resulted in not being able to get that open shooter or that open lane. So I think with some of the actions that they tried to run last year, with that extra focus, or maybe a team that's setting a better screen, that can open up a lot of things. But to me, it would just boil down to getting people on the move a little better and trying to get some more off ball movement, especially with the bigs. And then we talked about a few weeks ago with Vasar. I think really utilizing him, almost putting the ball in his hands, top of key a lot. Whether that's looking to attack a big, hit a guy on the wing, pick and pop. Sherrell talked about inverting the screen. So those would be something offensively, and then defensively. To me, Trimble will almost be the 3 on a defensive standpoint. I think a lot of guarding that top wing, and then if Bogavac is in the starting lineup, putting him on a secondary one. But then defensively, it'll be interesting because they do have some length and athleticism with Wilson and Vasar, and some size with Stevenson. So I think seeing how they're better able to protect the rim will be, to me, some of the things I'm watching from a defensive perspective. But would love to see them pressure a little more, especially maybe not Indiana Pacers style, but close to it.
Yeah, I was going to say defensively, I want to see them pressure more, considering, extend their defense further. It doesn't even have to be like full court pressure or anything, but once they get across half court, there's no reason, I don't think, that North Carolina can't have their guards be kind of up in the other guards, because they're going to have, like you said, at times there's going to be a time where there's Caleb Wilson, Jaron Stevenson, and Henry Vasar on the court all together. And what I like about those guys, they're not. Well, I mean, Wilson's a really good athlete. I think Vasar is a good athlete. I think Stevenson has some traits that are good. Maybe not a great overall athlete, but when you have those 3 on the court, I think they can cover a lot of ground, and they allow the guards to make mistakes. Even if you have Jonathan Powell in there. I mean, he played for a pretty solid defensive team in West Virginia last year. You have guys with size and length who you can say, okay, if guard X gets by Seth Trimble, then you've got Powell waiting in the wings to slide over, move his feet, use his athleticism. So that's my hope defensively, is just more pressure further out, and maybe, and it's not a way that Hubert Davis likes to play, so it probably won't happen. But just creating a few more easy baskets per game. If you can create 6 more points a game just from a couple of turnovers, I think would be a huge deal for UNC. 5 or 6 extra points per game, because I do think at times, I don't want to say the offense is going to be a struggle, but I need to see it first before I believe they're going to be like a potent offensive team. So if that's the case, use your defense to try and get a few extra points.
There's a couple of things that jump out at me on the heels of the comments from you guys there. North Carolina at times last season had 0 rim protection, and that's not to discount Van Allen Lubin's shot blocking prowess, which really took off towards the end of the season. And now North Carolina's going to go to a back line that has just a tremendous amount of length that they can potentially deploy, as Sherrell said. And when Sean's talking about North Carolina's offense having a little more fluidity and more movement, it immediately made me think of the old Bobby Knight quote about the hardest offense to guard is one that has 5 players moving constantly, or it's something along those lines. But he talks about how when you got 5 guys moving all the time, it makes you almost impossible to guard. So those 2 things jumped out at me, and I think that's something for fans to really potentially latch onto when they're hoping against hope of what next year looks like. Sherrell.
What you said, Joey, about length is another great point. And people, too often, they associate length with shot blocking. that's not necessarily the case. Length is like making it harder for the guy you're guarding to be able to see the basket when he's shooting. So just the sheer fact they're going to have length out there will make it more difficult for guys to make shots. So the shot blocking, maybe the numbers go up. It'd be great if they did for UNC, but even if they don't, just having someone taller who can run out at a 6'5" guy will make it harder and make it tougher to make shots. So just don't equate length with having to do only with shot blocking, I would say.
With just rim protection. Yeah, I think there's, if you think about the way the NCAA defends, or the way they regulate and legislate that, what a player's circle is. I mean, if you think about a player's arm length, he's got a larger cylinder that he's able to stack in front of an incoming offensive player. So anyway, let's get on to another question. From our guy L Brothers Media at L Brothers Media, El Jefe. He's a big fan of the show. He interacts with us a lot. So I want to make sure we throw one of his out there. Sherrell, you touched on this briefly as well. Does Jim Tanner have a full staff yet, or is all the work basically just been he and Hubert working together to rebuild the roster? Again, don't want to discount what Buzz Peterson and TJ Beisner have done, but can you talk a little bit about how Tanner's staff might start to come together now that it looks like the roster and the priority has kind of been achieved for the most part?
Yeah, I mean, can only talk about so much about it because, like I said, since he got here, I think he got the job on February 26th. So the last 3 months have all been about finishing the roster. And now the roster is close to finish. And now I would expect that you'll start to see maybe some interviews. I don't know if they'll do actual like job postings or if they have to with state law and all that good stuff. But you probably start seeing some of that stuff. And I'd imagine that by the time the season starts, they'll want to have whatever his full staff is going to be. They want to have those folks in and kind of operating and getting ready for the official visit season in the fall, and then start working on the portal for the next year. So it's still going to be a little bit, I would imagine, and we'll see what it looks like because in the release that was given, Tanner hasn't been made available by UNC for interviews or anything. So we still have to go basically by the release, and it said a staff. It didn't say how many, if they had to be in certain roles. It talked about analytics. It talked about player development. Talked about a few other things. So it could be a situation where it's a staff of 3 and they do each person does multiple things, or it could be a staff of 6. It's just hard to tell, and then we won't know really until it happens. But yeah, that's going to happen. They said it's going to happen. So it's just a matter of interview starting and then Tanner moving forward with it.
And they have absolutely been moving in silence for the most part since then. Something else to think about, and I don't know, and I'm not saying this will absolutely play into effect in how the hiring is done, but the UNC system does run on a July 1 through June 30th fiscal calendar. So that's something else to think about when you start thinking about job postings and new budgets and where the money's going to come from to pay these people, et cetera, et cetera. It's just something to consider. Again, I'm not saying whether it's going to matter good, bad, or indifferent, but it is something that will come into the process, I'm sure. Next question, and I'm throwing this to Sean just because I know how much he loves / really, really hates player comps. But at Claywright25 says, Luka reminds me of Dante Calabria. Am I on the right track? Who would be a good past player comparison? I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole, but Sean, this is why we pay you the medium bucks, pal. Go ahead.
I don't know. I thought I got off last time with pulling Jaden McDaniels for Drake Powell as a comparison. Well, Dante Calabria, in terms of one of the, and Sherrell can correct me, but one of the top, if not top 2 or 3 all-time shooters at UNC from a 3-point perspective. So I think that might be tough, especially tough in terms of that comparison. But and I'm hesitant just because we went through a season where somebody came in at such a high 3-point rate, and that was what was expected out of Cade Tyson. But I think with this, the form looks a lot better, and just the mechanics. So I'm not as concerned on that one. I don't know. Since this is freestyle, Sherrell, maybe I'll toss it over to you to see if you can help me out on this. Just because I'm gonna throw it over to Sherrell while I think on it.
That's a veteran move, dude. That's a very, very pro move.
Well, I'm going to be the person who says no to something but doesn't offer a solution. I don't think Dante Calabria is the comp because Dante, to me, was much more of a catch and shoot guy. There wasn't a lot of shot creation. And I think when you heard Sean earlier talk about Bogovac, he basically said, yeah, if you need a bucket, he can kind of go get you one. There was a lot of isolation that he was able to do when he was switched onto bigs or bigs were switched onto him. And that was never, from my recollection, Dante Calabria's game at all. Could be a sign of the times. Maybe he had that in his system and he just didn't do it because of the people he played with. But yeah, I don't necessarily see Dante Calabria there. You're looking for a 6'5" guard with, pretty good handles who can shoot 40% from three and can take advantage of a mismatch. So whoever fits that description, there you go. That's your comp.
I mean, I think for him this past season, it was kind of a 50-50 split on threes and twos. So it wasn't, I feel sometimes for the catch and shoot guys, you often see, especially now, you're seeing 70% threes and 30% twos. So he did have a good balance in terms of what this past season, what he was bringing. Joey, yeah, maybe you want to throw out a little bit of a comp.
I'm reaching here just because you guys struck out, so you've left it to the host now. You've left it to the host now, but I would say maybe a shorter, poor man's Reggie Bullock. I think folks got really used to Reggie's almost automatic perimeter shot towards the end of his time at North Carolina, but he had some of that versatility that Sherrell is talking about. Was able to exploit mismatches because of his length, and also had some ball handling ability. So that's who I'd throw out there. I know it's not a perfect comp, but comps aren't perfect by nature, I guess. Let's move on to the next question before you guys totally crap all over my Reggie Bullock attempt, because I can see it in Sherrell's head right now. Literally steam's coming off his head because he hates that. Our guy Miroslav, who again, guy from Ukraine that follows UNC basketball. Big ups to that dude. Since the last three starters are obvious, or since at least three starters are obvious, who are you taking in a Powell versus Bogavac competition, and possibly Wilson's versus Stevenson for game one? So I think what he's asking, Sean, is who do you think is going to get the starting nod between Wilson and Stevenson and Powell and Bogavac?
I think most likely Bogavac, just due to you're looking at somebody that's turning 22, so basically a senior that has several years of experience, to Powell, who has, and yeah, he did start a lot of games in the Big 12, but I think still learning. So it's easier just from a chemistry. I don't know if it's chemistry is the right word, but just from that standpoint to slot Bogavac in. But I do think Powell, just given what he did show as a freshman, and I think what he can do a little bit more of, definitely it's going to be a good competition. And then from Stevenson, to me, I know when he committed, there's a lot of discussions. Is he is a 3-4? Been pretty adamant he's a 4-5. So I think this gives him that ability to fill in for Wilson, fill in for Vasar to an extent. He is, I think he measured 6'8.5" with no shoes, so give him 6'10" with a 7-foot wingspan. And I think that can be a good position for him, where I would put the ceiling for his potential a little bit higher in those positions versus a catch and shoot three, unless he does significantly improve his 3-point shot or improve his agility. But I think he can succeed in that type of role. So I do see him coming off the bench, and look, part of it is also going to be with NIL based on what some of these guys came in at. So I think that's also going to be somewhat of a determining factor as well regarding the politics of starting, at least initially, as well. So I don't think we can ignore that. But I would go, at least right now, Bogavac in the lineup. I think Trimble would get that assignment from more of a traditional three perspective, but you're putting him on the wing, and then you have Stevenson filling into that nice three-man big rotation, first one off the bench.
And I think, again, North Carolina fans would take that and run if you'd offered it to them 2 months ago. Another question.
Yeah.
This is for you. I was going to give you a question, Sherrell. You can't even wait for me? Nah, man, it's fine. Go ahead. What's up?
No, I was just gonna say in the Wilson Stevenson kind of debate, I think that might be one that gains traction in the coming months. I'm probably gonna go with Wilson, and it seems Strange to do considering how much playing time and experience Stevenson has in a better conference, on what's been a better team for his 2 seasons in college. But I think for one, we know Wilson is kind of a burgeoning talent and has the whole world in front of him. But two, he has a fire that he plays with that I think North Carolina is going to really need. I'm not going to say it's going to be Harrison Ingram or Cormac Ryan like because they're much more mature and they're older. But slow starts and kind of lackadaisicalness, which isn't a word, but whatever you want to say, lackadaisicalness, if that's a word, was a big issue for UNC last year. And the slow starts, it wasn't just last year; they've been an issue for some time. And I think having a player like Wilson in the starting lineup to help with that kind of mindset to start of like I'm not going to be outworked, I'm going to go for every rebound, et cetera, who has the internal and external fire that's shown. I think you need that to start a game. So it might not even be that they're that different of players right now, but I think the intangibles for Wilson make me want to give him, kind of more time to start.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would argue with that either. I think that's a pretty sound strategy and probably something that will end up materializing. And you also have to consider, what I'm going to say it, what promises may have been made to certain players on the recruiting trail. That remains to be seen for sure. Moving on, this is the question I was going to give Sherrell before I totally joshed with him a little bit. From at JJC0920. Which transfer needs to improve the most for this team to be a contender? And I think considering Sherrell's apt and repeated take that North Carolina has a lot of guys that have tremendous upside, but they're going into this year expecting that upside to materialize. So Sherrell, I would ask you, which transfer of the ones that have that have been announced so far, which do you think is the one that has to do the most for North Carolina to be what North Carolina wants to be?
I can't answer Seth Trimble since he's not a transfer, right?
Nope, I'm just going with the question
Okay.
that JJC gave us, and he did not put Seth Trimble on there, which I know it's the default answer for this coming season of podcasting, but he said transfer, and Seth did not transfer and come back.
So I mean, it's either Kyan Evans or Henry Vasar. I think I lean towards Evans just because he's a little bit more of an unknown, having played at Colorado State, whereas we saw Vasar do some really good things in big games in the Big 12. So probably Evans because again, North Carolina, like Sean said, they lost three guys who individually were really, really, I think, good players and will continue to show that at their next destinations. So he's got to kind of come in and try to be himself, but he also has to show that he can be the lead guy as far as an initiator and a distributor. So if he can maintain his shooting ability while also becoming a better handler or distributor, then I think you have a player who is on par, if not better, than what they had last year. However, if he kind of stays flat as a distributor, ball handler, and stays flat as a shooter, then I think he's not as good as what they had in concert or in total last season. So if he can take his game to the next level and do some of the things that point guards at Carolina have traditionally done, again while keeping that shooting stroke, then yeah, I mean the ceiling for North Carolina rises considerably. So I would say him first, and then probably Vasar second, because really, if you look at it, the way the team is built, whether it was on accident or not, I think it's all around the talent of Vasar and Wilson, and then everything kind of pivots off of those two. It's not that dissimilar from Baycott and RJ Davis 2 years ago. It's just that those guys had been in school for 3 and 4 years, whereas these guys they probably have never met until Vasar and Wilson get on campus in a couple of weeks. So there is a difference from a chemistry perspective. But all that to say, Kyan Evans is the answer for me. But I think you can make a strong argument for Vasar as well.
All right, last question, and we'll get out of here. Shout out to everybody who dropped these in. I think I only gave about an hour and some change of time for folks to get good questions in here before we recorded today. So shout out to everybody who responded and responded well. These have been good. At DNAD2131 or DNAD2131 on X, formerly known as Twitter. Sean, this is yours, and we'll get out of here. You talked a little bit about Luka and Trimble playing together. DNAD2131 asks, can Luka and Trimble play the 2 and 3 together effectively? And he talks about Trimble guarding threes in that situation. This is the question. What does that look like offensively? And I think that's pretty strong. So flipping that to you, Sean, give me a good answer.
Offensively, I think it gives two people that can attack the basket and transition. We've talked about hopefully Trimble's vision can improve on in transition, but I think it gives what Trimble lacks in size, he makes up with for strength and athleticism. And Bogavac, you have somebody at 6'5". So offensively, Trimble's weaknesses or main improvement points are Bogavac's strengths, and probably vice versa. So I think it does give complementary pieces together, especially when you add Evans from a shooting perspective. But it is going to be very, very team dependent, especially from that defensive perspective. As we said, traditionally, no lineup constraints. Would probably want to put Bogavac at the 2, just offensively and defensively. But I do think he can fit well with Trimble in terms of the different styles of play, both offensively and defensively. And then at the same time, you can slot some of those guys down in certain situations. I know Trimble hasn't gotten a lot of playing time. You probably don't want him manning the point for long periods, but I wouldn't be surprised if we do see it. You could go Trimble, Bogavac, Powell. So then, you're increasing your height. So offensively, I think their strengths complement each other and offset each of their weaknesses.
And fellas, that's a heck of a show. I appreciate y'all getting together with me to do this for our listeners and viewers. Again, I don't think we have this without good questions from the listening audience. So if you got your question read tonight on the show, shout out to you. Way to go. Way to contribute in a positive fashion. We always love that. So we will appropriately point to the passer. Nice job. Sherrell, Sean, thank you guys so much. I hope you can enjoy your summers. I know it's officially not summer on the seasonal calendar, but man, something about getting past Memorial Day and flipping over to June 1 makes it feel official. So hope you guys are enjoying yourselves. If you're getting some time to do anything outside of work and chasing down international commitments, Sherrell, I hope you're enjoying yourselves. But we will try to be back here in our regularly scheduled every other week slot for all of you listening to us. If you have not, please rate, review, subscribe. And just happy that you guys are a part of our content. We hope that you continue to enjoy it. If you don't like it, let me know. I know posting reviews and stuff online are helpful, but if you're posting negative reviews, man, let us know and we'll try to fix it, as opposed to just posting it behind a shell and a random keyboard handle. If you let us know directly, we can hopefully try to fix it. Sherrell, Sean, thank y'all so much. Shout out to Johnny T-Shirt for sponsoring, to John Siegley for producing. And until next time, we will talk to you very, very soon on the Coast to Coast podcast here on InsideCarolina.com. I'm Joey Powell. Tell your mother we said what's up.